Mister Mosquito is a quirky Japanese title that was originally released back for the PS2 in 2001, but eventually saw a wider release in North America and Europe during March of 2002. And sadly, the game posted rather poor sales from what I've read outside of Japan. I'm not entirely sure of the reasons behind this. While the game did receive some rather average review scores and was lambasted somewhat by a short review on Toonami as being a rental title, the game isn't exactly undeserving of praise in some areas. The story of Mr. Mosquito is rather simple and straightforward. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to suck life-giving blood from the various members of the Yamada family, in order to survive the upcoming winter. This mission will be highly dangerous, since you'll need to avoid various obstacles such as bug zappers and mosquito coils, as well as avoid detection from your chosen prey. But if you are successful, you will be a hero among mosquitoes. Visually speaking, the game is alright in my opinion, even though it does feel a bit lacking in terms of small details. Regardless, the visuals do a decent job giving the players some perspective on how small they are in comparison to their targets, which does work to create a little tension until you become engrossed by all the sexual undertones of the game. Music-wise, the game sounds like a cross between generic elevator music and sleazy jazz. While there are other selections in the soundtrack as well, the suggestive nature of some of the pieces already adds the undertones of the game. Actually, considering some of the visuals and sounds that come out of people when you bite them, I'd argue they are more like overtones than undertones at this point. On the voice acting front, the game is decent, although the narrator only seems to add to the suggestive nature of the game at times.
How was it the first time?
In terms of gameplay, Mr. Mosquito is a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion, albeit some of my complaints have to do with the nature of the game itself, but that's the nature of being a critic, is it not? For one thing, I find the need to suck blood from specific areas of the body to be rather limiting. This is only compounded by the fact that later stages require the player to act rather quickly, since the window of opportunity to attach to your target is rather brief. Sometimes this window can be measured in seconds, and considering your lack of ability to make tight turns beyond a quick 180, you'll find this limitation rather annoying rather quickly. And what sort of mosquito would suck blood from a specific target area anyway? Wouldn't it make more sense to pick any spot where the target is vulnerable and less likely to notice you? After you latch onto a target area, though, is where the game is at its most dangerous, since if you get swatted while in the middle of sucking blood, it's an instant game over regardless of how much health you have. So it's advisable to pay careful attention to your stress gauge. You can limit how quickly the stress gauge builds by sucking blood in line with your target's heart rate and keeping the square inside of the blue bar. If you suck blood with precision, you can potentially fill 2 or 3 tanks in a single sitting, and while it might be a bit strange that the player has a health gauge but suffers instant death if swatted during their meal, it is sort of strangely fitting considering how many of these little pests I've crushed on my arms over the years. Though be warned, if you carelessly approach your target, it can also raise their stress meter to the point they will openly attack you. After they have become enraged, you'll need to hit specific target areas on their body in order to calm them down again, and the locations of some of these points only adds to the sexual overtones of this game. Then again, you may actively choose to engage in battle with your target as well, since defeating them quickly can net you additional colors. Another factor to keep in mind during fights and while approaching your targets is that as you fill your tanks with blood, you'll become heavier and actually slow down and become a bit more difficult to maneuver. And while I do admire this aspect of the game, I do find your overall range of motion a bit disappointing considering how maneuverable flying insects tend to be. Outside of annoying your prey, you can also collect various items such as heart rings, fruit, and extra tanks. If you manage to fill all of the extra tanks, you'll be able to play out the next year at the Yamada residence, which will be even more difficult to survive. But I'll admit to finding the collection aspects of this game rather boring and unappealing. I'd rather spend my time dying on my targets than actually searching an environment that can be filled with traps.
If you sit too close to the TV.
Ultimately, Mister Mosquito isn't a bad game per se, but I still couldn't bring myself to finish it. I just find the game to be too repetitive, which is sort of ironic considering the game is only comprised of 12 stages and can be beaten in under 3 hours, easily. As for my final verdict on the game, well, it is worth checking out if you're looking for an original title on the PS2, but I would call it ill-advised to spend more than a few dollars on this title at this point in time.